And we're back on Inside the Ropes, and if you're a professional wrestling fan, chances are that the one wrestling film that you will never forget and you will always remember is Beyond the Mat. From Dennis Stamp not being booked, to Jake the Snake Roberts, all the way to the Royal Rumble where Mick Foley gets hit in the head alarming amount of times with a steel chair by The Rock. But the man that was behind that movie is the man with us today. It is the one and only Barry Blaustein. How are you, Barry?
Hi, nice to talk to you.
Thank you for coming on the show. So, yeah, we wanted to get you on and talk about the film, and I guess kind of how you got to that point. I mean, what were your first memories as a wrestling fan, and what kind of got you hooked on it when you were young?
Well, I think I liked it because my mother said I shouldn't be watching it. So I think that's my initial reason why I liked it. You know, to this day, I don't know why I like it so much, and I still watch it. I just like the outrageousness of it all. I like that it's a combination of entertainment and athleticism, and I like the idea of men taking their matters in their own hands and this bigger-than-life portrayal, portrayal of life. That doesn't make sense what I just said. Everything is bigger than life, and I like that it's. I like that it's a great mixture of show business and sports.
Yeah, no, it is. And I guess because you then went on to become a successful screenwriter in Hollywood, and then you decided to do a film about wrestling. I mean, that's quite a brave move, because I guess at that point it maybe wasn't the most popular thing to do from a film perspective.
Yeah, no one thought this was a good idea when I did it, because I was making a very nice living as a screenwriter, and I told my agents and managers, and going, I want to take a year off and just do a movie about wrestling, a documentary about wrestling. And they're going, are you crazy? I'm going, no, I think it'll be really interesting. And at that time, you know, wrestling in the States has its periods ups and downs, where it's very mainstream, and when it's not so popular in the mainstream. And when I started doing this, wrestling was, you know, it was just appealing to the fans, but it wasn't mainstream. And in the course of making the movie, the wrestling started taking off, became mainstream again.
When you were doing the movie and you were, I guess, kind of pitching the idea to the wrestling companies, was the WWF the first one you went to? Were they the ones that you really wanted to get on side?
Well, they're the ones I really wanted to get. I could not get into them. And Ted DiBiase tried to get me. I had a friend named Barry Bloom who was a manager of a lot of wrestlers. And through him, I met Ted DiBiase, and Ted thought it was a great idea. And he tried to get me to see Vince, and Vince wouldn't hear of it. And so then I went to WCW. And we had a lot of negotiations. I spent some time with them. And at the end of the day, they wouldn't sign my release. They wanted to be able to put an injunction against the film if they didn't like it, which my financiers, you know, they couldn't allow that to happen. And then I finally got to Vince again. I begged and begged and begged. I caught him on a good day. But and also at that time, WCW was beating WWF. I say at that time it was called WWF. And I caught Vince on a good day, and he finally agreed.
And one of the guys that I guess you had a conversation with and he did agree to it was Paul Heyman, who at that point, I mean, he was really wanting to get the ECW brand out there.
Yeah.
How did you become involved with him, and what were your dealings with him?
Well, Terry Funk, who really the documentary couldn't have been done without us, because Terry was the first big guy to sign on, and Terry's really respected among other wrestlers, and that Terry approved of me opened a lot of doors. And Terry kept saying to me, you got to come to ECW, you got to come to this place, ECW. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. And at that time, I had read about ECW, but there was no video available of them that I could get my hands on. And so I came to Philadelphia, and I did love it. I thought it was great. It was, you know, it's like a midnight movie showing with the fans responding, and it was real sort of a community there. And they agreed right away. Getting Paul to appear on camera is, you know, I was going to call the movie "Searching for Paul." Just searching for Paulie, because, you know, tying him down is really hard. I think Paul is brilliant. He's one of my favorite people that I've met doing wrestling. Actually, one of my favorite people I've ever met, actually. He's so out there. And he's brilliant. I used to tell him that he could rule small countries. I don't know why he was wasting his time on wrestling. And his gift of gab.
The beginning of the movie kicks off with you covering Vince and you go to Stamford into the offices.
Yeah, right.
I watched the movie back recently before we talked, and when you see Vince at the beginning, you know, he's talking about this is what we do, and it means people might check us out for other things like movies and things.
Yes, we make movies.
But he seemed really, really false. He just didn't seem like he was that relaxed. What was the vibe that you got from him that day when you were trying to do the filming, when you were walking through the office with him, all that sort of stuff?
Well, I was trying to film the office. That we did later in the day because I just remember walking through that office and always getting lost. And there's so many security in the doors, and it's really easy to get lost. And I can't imagine the CIA being more complicated to break in that place. So that was really done at the end of the day. I think Vince was very uncomfortable in the beginning and unsure of, very wary of how he wanted himself presented. I personally, I think Vince is brilliant. And I remember I'd been shooting for about on and off, 2 months, 3 months. And I went to a taping in Sacramento. There's a scene where those two young guys tried out. And then afterwards, Vince had just done a match on TV with Son Austin beating the crap out of him in the ring. And the arena was empty, and everybody was taking down they're taking down the arena and taking down the ring and getting ready to move to the next arena. And Vince is there, and he's wearing a sweatshirt, and he's drinking a beer, and he goes, "I love this business." And the cameras weren't on or anything. And I said, "Vince, that's what I want to capture." Not this. I'm interested in Mr. McMahon. And that was the moment I saw the real guy, I felt. Because he really does love the business. And that's why he's so successful, He has a passion for it. He, sleeps, drinks. He's 24/7 on wrestling.
You've been around him for a long time, so I guess before we kind of go any further, what's your favourite Vince McMahon story from when you were around him?
Well, my favorite Vince McMahon story was after the movie came out. that was towards the end, wrestling took off in the making of the movie. And I think Vince regretted me doing this because he didn't have ownership of it. And initially Vince offered to fund the film, but I said it's a documentary, you can't have a subject matter be the funder of the documentary. But the filming took, in the course of shooting the movie, WWE and wrestling really took off and became very mainstream. And at a certain point, one of the CEOs, I was about to film the Royal Rumble match. And I knew I needed that match. And I told them, 2 months in advance, this is what I'm going to film this day. And they said, fine. And now some CEO called up and said, you're not going to be allowed to film. Filming's over. And I said, this is unfair. And I finally got to Vince. And I said, I know you too well, right? You're becoming your character, right? You just tell me in your heart that you know this is the right thing to do, that you're not screwing me over. And I said, your wrestling's riding high and all this stuff, and everybody's kissing your ass right now. But it goes up and it goes down. And I was here when it was down. And when it goes down again, I'll still be here. And he acquiesced and he said, all right, but this is the last day. And I remember going to my crew, going, we got to get everything because we're never being allowed back in here again. And there's something that, I don't think I've ever told this story before, right? So they were really watching what we were filming. And the scene where, so they were watching wherever I was going with a camera. But I had multiple cameras that day. And I needed something. I wanted to show The Rock and Mick going over the match, right? And planning the match. And they agreed to do it, and Rock and Mick agreed to do it. But they said, we'll only reveal so much. I go, fine, I don't care. Just whatever you want to reveal. But I knew if they saw me by then, they would freak out. So I was all the way on the other side of the arena while my other camera, I said, just send a small camera, film that.
And I guess, what a last day to be able to film.
Yeah, that was the last thing. That was the last thing I shot for the film. I think I went to Minneapolis to shoot Jesse Ventura.
In terms of when you were at Stamford, you were obviously allowed in the meeting with Darren Droz. He's got a puke! You know, that famous...
Yeah, that was bizarre because, Vince was showboating for cameras. And is this the way he really wants to come off?
I'm curious as to how, so far, you've explained that Vince maybe wasn't that comfortable, but he let you sit in on a very... I don't think anybody's ever seen anything like that since. Nobody's ever seen a gimmick being explained to someone by Vince McMahon and then him actually riling the guy up to do the gimmick.
Right. And the truth of the matter is, Darren couldn't throw. He could maybe throw. It would take him a long while to throw up on cue. Yeah, it was really, I'm like, oh my God, when he was doing it, I'm going, this is crazy. This is so surreal and bizarre.
Was that something that Vince said, come and film this?
I said there was, I said I want to find a young guy being told that I would like to follow a young guy. That was still when I was trying to follow a young guy. And he said, name me 3 guys that you think might potentially be big stars, right? And one was Edge, but who was he was very shy at the time, and Adam Copeland, he seemed kind of reluctant a little, so I didn't want to follow him. Another was Darren Drozdov, and the other is he does Prince Albert, and now he's the guy with all the tattoos on his face.
Matt Bloom.
Matt Bloom, yes, Matt Bloom, yeah. And so I wound up choosing Darren, and then Vince says, it'd be great if I could have the day where he said, I'm going to tell him he's making it. We're going to bring him up. And I said, great, if I can film it. He goes, sure, no problem.
Yeah, it's a scene that is fantastic. Did you get the vibe from Vince that, because he's one of these guys that I think, and I don't think he'll ever come out and do a book or anything like that.
Right. I'd love to do another document. I'd love to do a documentary just on Vince.
There seems to be 2 sides of opinion from people who've dealt with him. There seems to be the people who say he's the greatest guy in the world and he would do anything for his family, his talent, and all that sort of stuff. And then there's the other side that say that he's an egomaniac who screws everybody and, just uses people. What did you get from him?
I think both sides are right.
Really?
Yeah, I think both sides are right. There's a part of him that is both sides. I won't say the greatest guy in the world, but there's a part of him that is very sympathetic to the old wrestlers. That he's kind of a sucker for a sob story in a weird way. There is that gentle side. There's a very caring side, but there's a side of him that's ruthless. And there's a side of him, towards the end I was saying, you've become Mr. McMahon. You've lost who you are. I go, you become no different than your wrestlers. You're starting to live your gimmick.
And back to the film, someone who was a bit of a dark horse character in the film was the indie promoter Rolan Alexander. How did you find him, and what were your initial thoughts of him as a promoter?
Well, how did I find him? You know what? I forget how. It's so long ago. I forget how I found him. I just went to so many indie shows, and someone told me there's one. I'm in Los Angeles, so it was always to my benefit for just expense to find someone that was locally based. So this was, San Francisco's 500 miles away, so it's fairly close. I forgot how I found him. So someone told me about this wrestling school. I went up there. I thought, I don't know. At first I thought, how is he doing these shows in this warehouse? Isn't that illegal? Is that against zoning regulations? And I think he had trained a lot of good guys, but I think, he's a promoter. The most interesting thing was he would talk himself up so big, and Vince McMahon, and I think Vince could learn from me, and guys like me, and stuff like that. And then when I finally got him next to Vince, he was like, nervous, and oh my God, I'm next to Vince. One of Vince's first reactions to the film was when he saw it. Well, his first reaction, which was very honest, which is, I don't know, I'm too close to it. I don't know, I'm too close to it. But the thing that bothered him is that he was in the same movie and business as Rolan Alexander. And he says, I'm next to that guy, people are going to think that's who I am and all this. And I kept saying, Vince, if I did a movie about, because you know how big you are, you're used to how big you are and how impressive WWE is. I said, but the audience that I'm going for, which is the non-wrestling audience, they're not as familiar. And I said, if I was doing a movie about actors and I showed a guy in a dinner theater and then I showed Daniel Day-Lewis, I wouldn't go, they're the same person. They're different levels of success and achievement.
That's a great reaction. That should have been a DVD cover, like one of the quotes. And talk us through the day of the TV taping when you took Roland and Mike and Tony to the show. When you got there, what was the sort of procedure? Who did you guys go and see first? How did that all work?
Well, I tell them the dark match. They were driving in from Hayward, California, which they were from, which is about, I don't know, about 100 miles away. I met them and I had them walk down the dock, and Roland always complains I made him look fat, but I'm going, I didn't tell you to wear a tight T-shirt, dude. And I just followed them around, and then they were in the locker room, and I asked Mick, could he go talk to them, and Mick went in to talk to those guys, because I wanted some sort of connection. And I just say whatever you want to say and all this stuff. And what you see is pretty much what happened.
And what I found quite funny was there's one of the scenes where Vince and Jim Ross and Jim Cornette are sort of standing watching the guys, and Roland is right beside them.
Yeah.
But he doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
Did they have any interaction? Did he even say hello to Vince? Did Vince speak to him?
Yeah, they were behind him. He was just trying to overhear what they were saying about him. I'm going to pick up what they really think. But I think they were honest with what they really thought. I think Cornette was honest what he really thought. Someone told me that Jim Cornette shows this movie to developmental wrestlers, which is ironic because he was really against the idea of the movie in the beginning. But he's turned around, which I was glad, because he seems like a decent guy.
Did Roland and Vince have any interaction? Did they say hello? Did they have a conversation?
No, Roland. The only conversation Roland had very little interaction with these guys. They were not interested in interacting with Roland. Roland was there to bring them these guys, and then if they had any interaction, it would be with the guys directly, because they're not buying. If they picked them up, they weren't picking up Roland. And
then obviously Terry mentored Mick Foley, who I guess the kind of culmination of his part of the film was the Royal Rumble. But what was Mick like initially when you were talking about the film? Was he open straight away? Did you have to talk him into it a little bit?
Mick, I met Mick wrestling in the independent show in Las Vegas that Terry Funk was on, and he introduced me, and Mick and I immediately hit it off. And then I went to ECW with him. This is before I spent a lot of time, like I said, without cameras, so they would feel. So when I showed up with cameras, it wouldn't be like, "Who's this guy?" It'd be like, "Oh, now here I am, but I just have cameras." And I remember going on a road trip, a little, from driving from Philadelphia to somewhere in Pennsylvania, and Nick talking about what kind of promo he was going to do that night and all that stuff. And then he told me at one point, I can't be in the documentary because I was just signed by WWE, which at that time hadn't signed on. And so I was like, too bad and all this stuff. And then I got Vince's permission, and then I told Vince was one of the people I wanted to follow was Mick Foley, and he goes, "Really? Why him?" And I said, "Because he's fascinating. He's really interesting. I think, I was kind of surprised. He said, I think he's one of the best talkers, and you have him playing a character that doesn't talk. I don't get it." And he said, "Well, you raise a good point." And so Mick was really, at that point, very interested in doing it. And Mick was wonderful in it. And the hardest thing for me was showing Mick the footage at the end of the movie. Because at the end of the match, when he left that day, he goes, I think the kids handled it well. Because he said, he called me up and says, "How does it look?" I go, "It doesn't look good, Mick." He says, "But they seemed okay backstage." I go, and they did seem okay. I said, "But Mick, during the match, they were traumatic, and that had to be edited down because at one point, his son lost it."
Yeah.
But it got so. I felt after a while I was being exploitive as a filmmaker, so I cut back on it, and then showing him that footage, and everybody who was involved with the film saying, "Don't do it. He'll want the footage. He'll ask that to take it out, and you'll feel guilty, and you'll do it." I said, "I'm not going to feel guilty, and I don't think he'll ask to take it out." And he saw it, and we had the kids. I had an assistant take the kids out for ice cream while we did that segment, and he was like, he says, we saw his reaction. And I said, "No, it's got to stay in the film," and all that. Mick was great, and Mick went as a way to promote the movie, and there was a lot of heat between him and Vince for years as a result of that.
And I guess, if we're honest about it, Jake has come out and said that he's been misrepresented. Just to clear the air for people who don't know, can you tell us what you told him, and as far as you were aware, what he knew and what you think?
He knew. I told him the same thing I told everybody. This is a documentary about professional wrestling. Show these guys as real human beings. I said probably wouldn't we just go direct to video because it was originally planning just go direct to video, and that was basically it. But there was none of Vince's his claims I was doing for charity, and I was doing the anti-drug thing, or I was doing for Catholic charities. I don't know where he got that idea out of some pipe he was smoking. It must have been, because nothing could have been further from the truth.
And what was Jake's initial reaction then when he saw the film, and have you spoke to him since?
No, I've never spoken to Jake since. I know he's threatened me.
And the next person I wanted to talk about is somebody who kind of became a cult star through this, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. Dennis Stamp. Here's the weird thing. I'm pretty sure you're not going to be aware of this, but there's a couple of radio shows about wrestling in Scotland where we are.
Right.
And one of the shows that used to be around about a year ago, he spoke to them, and he's sort of, so now he's become sort of this like patron Scot because he just talks about wrestling all the time. But how did you come across Dennis Stamp? I'm presuming it was maybe through Terry Funk.
Yeah, it was through Terry. I asked Terry if there were any wrestlers in Amarillo that he knew that didn't make it as big as he has. He said, "Well, you got to meet this guy, Dennis Stamp." And I met Dennis, who was an exterminator, and had a trampoline in his backyard and all that stuff. And I wanted to be in the documentary, and I thought I'd make a good counterpoint to Terry. But it was so strange because he was the most. You couldn't do enough for Dennis, you know. I remember once I had to cancel a meeting with him because we were running along with Terry, and he goes to me, "Terry Funk, everybody's Terry Funk, never me." Terry, I go, "Dennis, why are you mad at Terry? If it wasn't Terry, you wouldn't be in this movie. Terry, he's the only reason you're in the movie." I think he's an interesting guy, Dennis, because he's like a lot of those guys who had a brief moment of fame and then it didn't happen the way he would have love for it to happen.
And looking back on it now, we're now 13 years after it's been released. Is there anything that you regret about it? Are you happy with the way it turned out? And would you ever do another wrestling project?
I avoided doing wrestling projects for years because I didn't want to be known as the wrestling guy, because I'm still, I have that love-hate relationship with it. No, there's nothing I would change about it. It's what it's. If any project I've ever done, it's the one I'm proudest of, and it's the one that people come up and ask me most about. And some of those other films were very successful, but this is the one they all want to know about. So I wouldn't change anything about the experience.
And do you think there's anything else wrestling related that you will do in your career, or do you think you'll kind of keep it to be on the mat?
Would I do it? And I don't know if I found something really interesting. They kept asking me to do Beyond the Mat too, and I had extra footage, and I just didn't think it would be as good. And as a wrestling fans have always been ripped off, and by come-ons and things like that, and by promoters. And I just didn't want to contribute to that. I felt an allegiance to other fans, and I thought, if I'm going to put something out, I want it to be worth people spending their money on it, rather than just, Beyond the Mat 2 and tarnish, what I liked about the first one. But I would love to do, I'd love to be, now that I'm older and, my kids are out of school and all that stuff, it's part of me go, I'd love to work in a wrestling company for a couple of months to see what that is like.
Not asking you to be very negative, but who was the most negative person that you were around, and why?
Well, Roland is negative.
Well, I guess what I mean by that is maybe negative in the sense of, is there someone who was so angry that you were even around?
Oh, that I was around? I would say Sabu was the most negative person. And Steve Austin wasn't friendly at all. He used to just give me these. But then I probably said, well, could you stop with the intimidating looks? It made your point. They kind of smiled. At that point, he was okay.
Barry, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Nice talking to you, and good luck with the show, man. I really did enjoy the interview. It really did make me, usually I'm on automatic during these things because I've been asked the same stuff over and over and over again. But this actually made me think, which was good.
Well, that's probably the best compliment we can get. So thank you.